I want to ask you something. When someone says, picture this, what actually happens for you? Do you see something? Do you feel something? Or do you just understand it? I'm asking this because for most of my life, I thought everyone's mind worked the same way mine does. Turns out it doesn't. I first heard the word aphantasia during a therapy session. Not in some dramatic, cinematic moment. Like there was no clipboard, no white walls. I was just sitting on my bed in my bedroom on a telehealth call with my new therapist. And it was literally our first session. And at the start of the session, I kind of mentioned or threw out there that I have ADHD. Mostly as like a preemptive apology for my long rant, just trying to set some expectations. And at some point, he asked me, what do I do socially since I work fully remote, aka trying to make sure I'm not a complete loner? I told him I had actually just joined a book club. And then he followed up and asked a question that felt incredibly casual at the time, but he said, how's visualization for you when you're reading? And I laughed and I just said non-existent. I just see the words that are on the page. And he paused and then he said very calmly, you might have aphantasia. He was careful to mention that it wasn't a diagnosis, but more so just an observation. But once he started to explain it, something shifted. He talked about how many people remember things by picturing them. Moments, scenes, faces, places, and I realized I don't do that. And I can't do that. My memories don't come back as images, they come back as facts and even I'll say emotional residue. I remember that something happened and I remember how it felt. But the visuals, that's missing. And then he said something that hit harder than I expected. He said, people with aphantasia often struggle with memory, not because they don't care or weren't present, but because memory is usually stored visually. And for me, that filing system that all y'all got access to, or if you're watching this, you might not have access to, doesn't exist. And he suggested something really simple. He said, take more pictures. Because for people like me, images don't create memories, they unlock them. That was a massive moment because I've always wondered why some people can recall shared experiences so vividly and why I sometimes only remember the fragments. Unless I see a photo. So once I see an image, the memory starts rushing back. And until then, it's, just a little bit quiet, me trying to figure it out. So let me explain what it's actually like inside my head. Because when someone tells me to visualize something, nothing appears. There's no image, no outline, no blur, no flash, literally nothing. Instead, there's this constant internal monologue. If you say apple, for example, I don't see an apple. I think red, kind of round, brown stem, maybe a green leaf. And if you say beach, I don't see waves or sand. I think sand and water, seashells on the shore, algae maybe in the water. I assemble concepts. It's imagination, just not visual imagination. It's narrative without imagery. And honestly, my brain never shuts up. It's logical, constant, structured, which probably explains why I got a STEM degree. But here's the thing. At the same time, I'm incredibly aware of my body, sensations, emotions, subtle internal shifts. And I think that's something I developed as a product of not being able to visualize. Years of meditation didn't give me pictures, they gave me presence. When you can't escape into imagery, you learn how to feel. What's wild is that I didn't fully realize other people could literally see things in their mind until much later in my life. I remember seeing this tweet that said something like, some people really can't picture things in their head. And I had this moment where I was like, wait a minute. Y'all actually see things when you close your eyes? Like full on visuals? And that felt so unreal to me. And if I'm being honest, my first reaction wasn't even curiosity. It was fear. I thought this put me at a significant disadvantage, especially creatively. I genuinely believed I'd been operating with some kind of invisible handicap my entire life. And looking back, there were signs. Growing up, whenever teachers talked about learning styles, I always said I was a visual learner, which is ironic. What I really meant was I need to see something physically happening in front of me to fully understand it. This showed up mostly in like labs. You know, I mentioned I was a STEM major, I studied chemical engineering, and I used to feel extremely anxious doing experiments, not because I didn't understand the theory, but because I hadn't seen it done yet. I was terrified I'd always mess it up simply because I couldn't picture it. Now, people always describe me as logical, grounded, practical, and emotionally intuitive, and now I truly understand why. This realization hit me the hardest when I thought about creativity, because I always assumed creativity worked a certain way. Like you hear a song in your head and you see a story play out, you visualize the final result, and I just don't do that. I don't visualize performances. I don't see music videos in my head, but I do feel. My creativity starts with emotions. Emotion blended with melody. My mood leads everything. If I'm feeling angry, for example, or powerful, I will belt. If I'm lonely or sad, my voice softens. Falsetto, space, breathiness. I think aphantasia forced my emotional awareness to grow stronger, like how someone who's blind might develop heightened hearing. What I lack in imagery, I compensate for in feeling. And over time, I stopped seeing that as a weakness. It started to feel like a superpower even. Now, that said, there is grief here sometimes, of course. Like I can feel sad knowing I might not remember certain moments the way other people do, especially the ones I know I'll want to remember forever. But instead of fighting that, I adapted. I take pictures. I document the experience, which is actually a huge reason I started YouTube. This channel isn't just content, it's an archive. Quick pause. If any of this is resonating with you, I'd love to hear it. If you're realizing your mind works similarly, or you've never been able to visualize and thought you were alone, leave a comment. And if this kind of self-reflection is something you want more of, consider subscribing. This channel is about understanding how we work, not fixing ourselves. I don't bring this up in every conversation, but when I do, people often feel sorry for me or curious or maybe a little disappointed when they realize I might not remember shared moments as vividly as they do. What matters more is how the people closest to me respond. For example, my partner gets it. One year for Christmas, he actually bought me a Polaroid. Now we take it on every single trip we go to, and we keep an album. And in this album, we write under the photo the location and year that the photo was taken. That meant everything to me because instead of judging how my brain works, he chose to work with it. Learning about aphantasia gave me this understanding, peace, grace. I stopped beating myself up for the memory gaps. I stopped forcing myself to remember the way other people do. And honestly, I'm so glad I found out later in life. If I'd known too early, I might have put myself into boxes that felt appropriate. Instead, I tried things anyway. I adapted. I found my own way. I still don't know how I've remembered anything at all to this point, but that question, it still sits with me. But I do know this. I'm not limited by this. And if you're watching this and realizing your mind works similarly, you're not broken, you're not behind, you're just wired differently. If this conversation mattered to you, stick around. This channel is a place where I document my growth, creativity, figuring things out in real time. And if you want to support that, like the video, subscribe, or share it with someone who might feel seen by it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.